Hello and welcome to the Art of Fundraising.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Great to hear that. I'm excited about this. Thank you for putting it together.
Thank you for showing up. We'll just allow another minute or two for people to join from around the world.
You got a new look going there, Paul.
Yeah, I needed to lose some weight,
Looking good.
Thank you. Hi, Marissa. Hi, Colleen. Hi, Helga. Hello to all the Michaels. Cole, good to see your name. Candace. Hello, Dalan. Greetings, Cherie. Hello, Lynn Jackson.
Hello.
Are you in St. Louis today?
Yes, today I am. Good to see you.
I don't remember who was telling me recently that you don't really live in St. Louis. You actually live in the red carpet room.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, yeah, it was nice.
Hello, Isaac.
Howdy.
Welcome, Deerage. Hello, Jefferson.
Oh, God damn it.
Oh, who's cursing? Must be a hard morning.
Oh, it's me, Jefferson.
Aha.
Hi, Paul.
I think I'm there, but I don't see my picture yet.
Oh, we're seeing your picture.
Oh, you are? Oh, cool.
Okay,
I can't see you
click.
guys. Let me see. Lauren's going to help me here.
Well,
see you. We
click
see
that.
you.
Apparently, click that.
With your lovely purple tunic.
Oh, there you are.
Hi
Good
there.
morning.
Good morning.
At the speed of Southern
I'm
Oregon internet.
here very. Oh yeah.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Hi,
So
Lauren.
hi Paul. Hi. So I have a crazy busy morning. I'm supposed to be at our old house to meet a workman at 10. And I need to leave in 15 minutes, but I'm going to try to follow it all on my phone, on Zoom on my phone. So I'm hoping
Wonderful.
I'll be able to hear.
Well, we'll hope that works, and we are recording. If you
Oh,
miss
great.
anything, you can catch up later.
Oh, thank you. That sounds great. Good.
And the best part of the art of fundraising for me is what people are raising money for. Hello, Jerry. Hello, Lillian. Let's begin with a short 1 to 2 minute version of who are you, where are you calling from, and what are you raising money for? I'll just call on people so we don't have to wait and step on each other's toes. Let's start with Helga.
Why me?
Because you're special. You're a VIP, remember?
I am raising money for having what I've done be able to continue after I'm gone by making a play space for kids so that they can do imaginative open play. These words probably don't mean things to other people. And a Lego world and making things with clay and just indulging in things that are not school,
Lovely.
structure.
And do
School.
I understand correctly that you're calling in from Talent, Oregon?
Yeah, I had to move
Lovely.
from Ashland, but my heart is still in Ashland.
Okay.
All right, I'll see you in a little bit.
And
Okay,
I'm doing the insurance paper.
okay. Oh, okay. It was wonderful, baby. I'll see you in a little bit.
if you're not intentionally speaking, if you could be so kind as to mute. And then unmute yourself when you're ready to talk. Cherie, do you pronounce yourself Cherie or Sherry? And I don't know if you pronounce your last name Voix or Voice. Looks like she stepped away for a moment. Let's have Jefferson Parson. You have to unmute, Jefferson.
Okay,
Here it comes.
I think I got it now. I would like to start a farm, a small, very small farm for immigrants, farmers, to raise food for their families. We would only need about an acre, and I'm hoping that someone who has a large farm or a large parcel, you know, it could be as small as 5 acres, but would be willing to donate an acre to our project. And that's what I want to do. Basically, it's to help, again, to help immigrant families, probably mostly Mexicans, feed their families, grow their own produce.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Lynn Jackson. You have to unmute.
Let's see if I can help you.
The shadow side of asking everybody to mute is everybody has to unmute before they talk.
That's true. So sorry about that. Okay. All right. My goal is, I guess, to get a new location for Dred Scott. It would be the Dred Scott International Education and Reconciliation Center. And we don't have a home. And the space we have now is a beautiful spot in a mall that's going to be torn down in 4 months. So we will be homeless for a bit. But this will be my swan song if I can pull this off. And I should say when I pull this off, because it's a daunting task the way it's starting out. So we definitely need funds for that. Some people want me to build, some people say move in ready, some say renovate, and we just have to see what God says. So.
Amen to that. And for those few people who don't know you, can you say your relationship to Dred and Harriet Scott?
Yes, I can. They are my great-great-grandparents, so I am their granddaughter.
I know
And
your
we
daughter
have
hates it when I do that, but I love to hear you say it.
Oh, you just love it, don't you? Yeah. So I started the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation in 2006, and we are just so overwhelmed. This is a 24/7 life existence
Well,
beyond imagination.
it's
So,
an honor to have you with us today. Thank you.
thank you.
And Andean Spirit, I don't know your name.
You know my name, Paul. You just don't know my my Zoom calling card. Yes, my name is Linda Tello, and I work in collaboration with Andean Spirit. They are an indigenous-led eco-tour company in Peru that my nonprofit, the other name you see on there, Whole Earth Engineering, helped to start. I am online here also with Cole Spitzer. He is from the Stevens Institute of Technology. I will let him speak for himself, so I will just keep for myself. But the project that I am working on is looking to help the Caro, which are the last indigenous descendants of the Inca, to construct a water distribution system for their alpaca in Peru, because climate change has impacted their community. They live about 15,000 feet above sea level, and they've been wanting to create this water distribution system so that they will no longer lose alpaca to starvation during the dry season, because alpaca is their main food and income source. So my background is engineering, and I love indigenous traditions, and I was able to connect with them. So Whole Earth Engineering was born, and that is what I'm raising money for.
And do you mind sharing about your day job?
Oh, yes. I work for the Department of Energy. I do environmental oversight for the Sandia National Laboratories.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gerald McWhirter, welcome.
Hey, Paul.
We're just introducing ourselves by saying your name and where you're from and what you're raising money for.
Oh, wow. My name is Gerald McWhirter. I'm in Chicago. I work for self pretty much. I have several different companies in the construction, real estate, that kind of a thing. And if I were to raise money, it would be to provide affordable housing.
Awesome. Brian Kane.
Running, get some water. I had to run back when I heard my name being called.
I saw you leave.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Brian Kane. I'm the founder of Social Purpose Corrections, the nation's first nonprofit full-service outcomes-based corrections corporation. So we are, our vision is to operate prisons, jails, community corrections as a nonprofit, take the revenue invested and reinvest it back into people, not Wall Street. So basically removing the profit motive of corrections. We've done some fundraising so far, but as you can imagine, we're challenging U.S. corrections and they're pushing back. So we need more. We will be a self-funded nonprofit with the contracts with the government. Eventually, it's just to get to that point where we have those contracts. So, hi, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Brandon Gilman.
Hello, sorry for the background noise. I'm a student at Stevens Institute of Technology, and I'm fundraising for a project that we have in Peru with a nonprofit called Engineers Without Borders.
Cool. Thank you. Cole.
Hi, yeah, I'm also from Stevens Institute of Technology, from the Engineers Without Borders chapter here. And me and Brandon are on the fundraising team for that. And like we work with Linda, she's one of our mentors on the project. And
great.
Yeah.
Great mentor to have.
Yeah.
Colleen Dick. Hello, I'm Colleen Dick, and I am from Alpine, Utah. By education, I am a nutritionist, also have a master's degree in biochemistry, and discovered a number of years ago that we have problems. Unfortunately, they're all interrelated. And we have, I spent a couple of years being very depressed about the whole matter. Not being able to get really high quality food not for my clients. So I discovered permaculture. Then I discovered that everything is connected to everything else. And it's really hard to change an enormous system. So I have the idea that why don't we put the best of breed of all regenerative technologies and methodologies into one place and do a best of breed community that we're calling Rainbird Village. We found a location. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It has already a lot of infrastructure in place that we were going to need. And the cost of it, though very large, is in cost per acre, the lowest in the county that we have. So anyway, it's a big project. It's going to cost a lot of money, but I'm here to learn. So thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you for joining us. Elizabeth, since your iPhone is up, let's call on you.
Oh, I have to figure out how to unmute myself. Where is it?
You're up. You're doing fine.
Oh, do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought it was muted. So are we talking about what we're raising money for?
Yes, where you're from and what your name is and what you're raising money for.
I have just moved to Carmel, California to take the position of executive director for the Carmel River Watershed Conservancy.
Ooh.
And we are working, where the organization was founded when the river was declared one of the most degraded rivers in the country 20 years ago, and we've been working to restore it ever since. I'm eager to join the fight.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
There,
David
I
Allen
found the video
Foster.
button.
Hey, there she is.
Good morning,
The
I'm David.
organization has weirdly not done much fundraising, so they just got one big donation early on, and they've been working off of the interest since. So
happens a lot.
Good morning, I'm
David. Yes,
David Allen Foster. I'm in Palo Alto, California, the land of the Ohlone Indians, and I'm raising funds to get a new nonprofit started called Uplift 490. The 490 means for the other 90%. I'm a designer, sort of multifarious designer, mostly industrial design in the last 20 years, and I'm applying those talents to collecting, connecting, and creating products for the other 90%. So any very affordable product, we're either cataloging it, helping to develop it, eventually helping to fund it, by microfinancing ourselves. But we have to get started in our fundraising first.
indeed. Thank you. Dheeraj Singhal, great to hear your name.
Hi, Paul. So glad to be a part of this finally. I'm calling from Los Angeles, and I'm raising money for the Music Circle, which is an organization that is focused on popularizing Indian classical music and bringing artists from India to the Los Angeles community. That's what I'm doing.
Thank you. I hope everyone else is enjoying the diversity of what people are doing and what they're raising money for as much as I am. We're going to indulge in this for a little while longer, and then we'll dive into the subject matter that we all convened for. Jerry Lehrberger, can I call on you to say hello? We'll circle back around to Jerry. Let's move down to Isaac.
Howdy, I'm Isaac Olyansky. We're calling from Ashland, Oregon. My colleague Michael Dotson is also on the call with us. We work for the Klamath Siskiyou Wildland Center. It's a mouthful, so we go by KS Wild. And our mission is old growth ecosystem and biodiversity conservation in the state of Jefferson, shall we say, Southern California, Southern Oregon and Northern California. Thanks for having me.
Is there any old growth in Oregon?
Oh, yeah.
You have to take me there.
I'd
Outside
be
the Kalmiopsis?
Yep.
All right.
That's a bit of it.
We have a date to arrange. Jane Lytell.
All right. So I'm going to try. So you can hear me, right? I'm a little.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, I was trying to put my video on, but there I am. But it's over here. Hi, I'm Jane Lytell, and I have been working in cybersecurity since 2013, but I actually started entering the internet back in 1993. And I'm trying to start up a series of educational cybersecurity comic books, a supplemental curriculum for high school students as well as college students. And so what I have done so far is create a villain for each of the 16 critical infrastructures. And then I have a heroine who is Sarah Bolt, and she has her cat Ping. So I've written one of the comic books, but I'm really struggling with affording how to illustrate this because of the expense. So that's what I would like to use the funding if I
Yeah,
get
it's
money.
really amazing how often people who have wonderfully worthwhile dreams for the future get slowed down and diverted around getting the money to do things like translating the book into Spanish.
Exactly, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining.
Okay.
Julian.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Julian. Welcome.
Katie Petra says hello, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask you to send her my greetings.
Yeah, she was excited that I'm here with you. So I'm Julian Barber. I'm in San Francisco, kind of a serial entrepreneur right now. One of the projects I'm currently working on is creating AI solutions to help out businesses in Southern California that are manufacturers to find clean energy solutions.
Great. And Larry Green.
Hi, Paul. Boy, what a great group. This is really pretty amazing. Larry Green, I live on San Juan Island in Northwest Washington. And I joined up with a group of friends who created Regenerate Cascadia. It's all about building resilient regenerative communities in the Cascadia bioregion. Specifically, although I'm helping in that regard, working on a couple of projects and getting up with them. My main focus is a sub project, and that is building a eco-regional learning center at Fort Worden in Port Townsend, and we're also with my associate also going to be working on creating a channel that deals with these topics in our Salish Sea ecoregion.
A channel being a media channel or a channel in the ocean?
A media
Okay.
channel. Okay.
I love water metaphors, as you know.
Yeah, well, we have water all around us, that's for sure.
Yes, indeed. Marissa.
Hi, I'm Marissa Lamagna. I'm in Oakland, California, and I'm the founding director of Bay Area Green Tours. We started in 2008, so this is our 16th year. And we basically shine the spotlight on all the models of sustainability with the idea of empowering people to incorporate environmental responsibility and social justice into their professional and personal lives. So we work with schools, we work with corporate groups like LinkedIn, Google, which is, I especially like bringing people out that have no idea what regenerative agriculture is, to learn about permaculture, to learn and see models that they can incorporate into their life. So it's active learning. It's not reading or talking about it. It's actually getting out, putting your hands in the dirt, learning about energy, green buildings, all kinds of topics. Although my favorite is anything to do with regenerative ranches and farms. So I work all over the Bay Area down to, well, probably Monterey, Salinas out to Brentwood, and north to Healdsburg. So in the entire area, especially with schools. I particularly love working with youth and showing them career paths, including ones where they don't wind up in debt, where they could learn specific skills in the workforce development programs that we have in our area. But the reason I'm raising money is that I need to raise the money to hire somebody to take my place. And so that's a big project because we are very much volunteer run. I have very good, wonderful, dedicated volunteers, and they all really, I want to hire them and let them, be compensated more than some of them are getting compensated for some time.
Righteous. Awesome. I wonder what it means symbolically that of the 28 people who are on the call, 24 people have names that start with letters in the first half of the alphabet. I think that means we have a bunch of go-getters. Michael Burris.
Good morning. I was listening to what you guys are saying, and those are all really powerful things. And that's what I'm here to explore the space. I work locally with manufacturing groups, trying to get them to maybe look at different people in with disabilities, things like that. And I was able to be a part of a new program that just launched recently in Washington, D.C., Diverse Manufacturing Supply Chain Alliance. And that's about getting more underrepresented people capital to get into the supply chain. So I just want to learn more and just keep growing. So thank you for having me, Paul.
Cool. Thanks for joining. Michael Dodson, more KS Wild.
Hey, Paul, good to see you. Yeah, Michael Dodson, director of the Klamath-Siskiyou Wildland Center. I work with Isaac. I'm here because, I started fundraising here over 11 years ago and really focused on major donors back then. And I was development director. Now I'm executive director, and Isaac's helping fundraise. So just diving back in after a few years of the COVID era of getting back in person, just hosted our first big event in 4 years, and just working with Isaac to just be better at, finding ways we can build capacity sustainably. And that for us is, bringing in scientists, attorneys, organizers, that sort of thing to advocate for our forests, waters, and wildlife around here.
Thank you. And Celine Diaris.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Celine Diaris. I'm now based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and that's where I'm calling in from this evening for me. My organization is US based. It's called Regenerative Rising. We're a 501c3 out of Colorado. We started producing the first conferences, bringing the discussion about what is regenerative into the United States in 2017. And in 2018, we brought the food and fashion industries together to really look at how could they be more collaborative, especially when it comes to regenerative agriculture. Post COVID and cancer for me, I'm now leading an effort inside of our organization to produce a new curriculum called Foundations and Principles of Regeneration. And that's what I'm working on, raising a new tranche of funds for. We've received a grant for that project. And yet there are ideas that we're generating around how we want to really create a highly interactive experience for learners. We're targeting corporate participants for this curriculum so that folks who are working on SDGs and other types of sustainable initiatives can actually understand what regeneration actually means. I've heard that term used by many of you in a proper context. As you also all are probably familiar, the term is being co-opted in many ways. And so to really safeguard the indigenous fundamentals that it really represents, and it's helping those of us who are all indoctrinated into the thought forms that have shaped the problems. We need new thinking in order to resolve those. So that's what my work is surrounded and grounded in, and what I'm raising money for.
Here, here. Thank you. Dalan.
That's me, David Foster.
Ah, okay. And I see people are making generous use of the chat. Please continue to do so. If you've noticed any commonalities, feel free to message each other individually. I think we're coming down to Snow Thorner and Jerry Lehrberger. Snow, are you able to unmute?
I sure hope so. Great
Me
morning,
too.
everybody. Yeah, what a lively bunch this is. Giving life to the world, I would say. Yeah, I'm Snow Thorner, and I almost 1 year ago opened the first justice-inspired art gallery and gathering place in the Pacific Northwest. So what we do is we shine the light on artists who are or once were incarcerated, as well as their families, and including those who have been impacted by serious crime and their families. So we are raising money to first of all help the public understand what it feels like, what it is like to be locked up, and the need for positivity in their lives to increase their self-value, for these artists to feel connected to their purpose. And I think that gives you a pretty good picture for now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Lillian Taylor.
Hey there. So I'm from South Florida, and I have an organization, or I should say we have an organization. It's a for-profit entity called Blooming Zennies. Our mission is to help children with their mental health by introducing them to, in a light way, to severe stressors, and to demonstrate what are best practices for responding to those. Our purpose is to help cut down on the incidence of mental illness that tend to result in about 20% of the children who encounter that sort of stress, and the sort of mental illness that lasts for an entire lifetime. So we want to disrupt that.
Wow. Thank you. You're always into the most fascinating stuff. I love every time we get to touch base. And last but not least, Jerry Lehrberger, are you able to unmute? Sounds like not. Jerry Lehrberger is the owner of Jackson Wellsprings in Ashland, Oregon, and the founder and president of Health Resources International, through which he is attempting to establish a nature preserve near the Wellsprings and to expand the Wellsprings into its potential as a regional global healing center. And hopefully he'll be able to unmute a little later and say a little bit more. All right, did I miss anybody? I think we've got, everybody has had a chance to say hello and share a little bit. I wish we had time for everybody to delve more deeply.
Hi, Paul.
Yes.
Lauren Oliver here.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Sure. So, sorry, my phone is on too, but I can't even get really on. I'm calling in from Ashland, Oregon, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get off the phone because it's ricocheting. I am a clinical psychologist who, during I was getting my PhD, I had a strong value of, I want to do this work, but I want to put myself out of business. So while I was in grad school, I started working with a partner, and we set up a nonprofit called Support Group Network. And we trained, over the next few years, we trained 50 groups that all had shared leadership, communication training to really focus on how do you deliver your messages and strong feelings with respect. And also, how do we create agreements that allow for a sustainable organization circle that can work together over time on common values, but also common projects and action. So I've been doing circles through the years. I'm a member of the Millionth Circle, which we do circles at the UN and at the Parliament of the World's Religions. And I'm also a member of the Southern Oregon Pachamama Alliance, which I noticed a couple people have mentioned. And I'm very honored with the fact that the local Pachamama Alliance organization adopted my circle methods for our leadership team meetings. So for years, we've been doing really well using circle. So I believe that circle is really, really important to combat the social isolation and loneliness that is so common now, and also to really help people remember, how can we cooperate? How can we build groups and organizations that are sustainable and can hold ourselves together as we do the work we're intending to do? So I want to raise more money to train a lot of facilitators who don't have the privilege I have in my retirement to do this on my own dollar. I need facilitators who need a little income, but need this training to carry on. So that's my first step. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Anyone else that I neglected? What an awesome assemblage of people.
I agree. Awesome assemblage.
We're gonna talk this morning about the art of fundraising. Well, it's morning for me. It's not for some of the others of you in Europe and other places. But what I want to start with is that fundraising is about people. I started fundraising some 50 years ago, if you can believe it. And what I found was that 50 years ago, as it is today, fundraising was about people. It's about relationships, because even government grants, foundation grants, corporate sponsorships come through people. And so I began a 50-year inquiry into what does it take to raise money. And what I found was that you can ditch the flash to get the cash. There's some awesome people out there who don't have fancy PowerPoint presentations or automated videos or any of the resources that so many people think are so important because they care. It's a sad truth that if the reason you're raising money was what it takes to raise money, there would be no starving children in the world. It's not just about why you're raising money, but really from whom are you raising money and how? So as we go into this conversation today and again on Thursday, I'm going to ask you to remember a startling statistic. 85% of the charitable dollars in the United States come from individuals. And this is true around the world as well. And even the entrepreneurial dollars that are raised, still 85% comes from individuals. So I call my approach Dreamosophy, which is the wisdom of dreaming. And it's a unique process for dreaming up a life worth giving. And whether what you're raising money for is a real estate development or a new invention or a project that you're working on, the principles are largely the same. They begin with having a group of people who share a vision. Many of the people on this call I met through Presidio Graduate School, and when Bob Dunham and I taught effective management, communication, and action, Bob used to talk about a leader is someone who puts forth a vision that other people commit to. So my very first fundraising job in 1971 was with a group in Los Angeles called the California Conservation Project. After 7 years of answering the phone, California Conservation Project, I finally slammed down the phone one day when I was tired and said, we're not California Conservation Project anymore, we're the Tree People. At the Tree People, we started out in Andy Lipkis's bedroom of his parents' condominium. And over the course of the next 10 years, we were able to obtain a park in the city of Los Angeles for free. City leased it to us for $1 a year. It was 10 acres then. Now it's about 125 acres. My former wife and I created a children's program there called the Little Tree House, which was very successful. And the park is still there. The little membership program that I created is still there. I remember how excited we got when we got our first $100 donation, until somebody looked at the check and said, Paul, do you know the name on this check? I said, no. They said, you've never heard of Baron Hilton? We were young and naive and just excited to be doing what we were doing. And the little membership program that I created is now raising about $1 million a year for the Tree People. They're a wonderful organization. If you don't know them in LA, I highly recommend visiting. The best acronym in the world, Coldwater Canyon Park Community Environmental Education and Participation Center. Fast forward a little while, and my wonderful older sister, Hunter Lovins, and Amory, her former husband, and our Hunter's and my mother, Farley, started the Rocky Mountain Institute in Old Snowmass, Colorado. They've recently moved to Boulder. And RMI was a think and do tank. It was dedicated to energy, water, arable land, national defense, and the links among them. It's still there, still working on things like redesigning the Empire State Building and working with the White House to reinvent fire. They're largely focused mostly on energy now, but a wonderful organization that I'm pleased to have helped start. During those years, we also helped John Denver start the WinStar Foundation. Once again, my former wife and I created a program there called Earth Keepers that was wonderfully successful for as long as it lasted. One of my favorite projects that I've worked on is Planting Justice in Oakland. And Planting Justice has learned to implement these principles of recognizing that it's people who matter. Like some of the other folks on this call, they're dedicated to working with formerly incarcerated people around the theme of food justice. Last summer, they were pleased to receive a gift of $5 million from an individual who had heard about their work through the grapevine. And just recently, it was announced that they were one of the $1 million recipients of a gift from Mackenzie Scott to support their work in creating employment for formerly incarcerated people around food justice and teaching about food justice in the schools throughout the East Bay and San Francisco. They smooth the reentry process, and I've been on their board as the treasurer and in the finance committee for over 10 years now. And I'm an unabashed supporter of Planting Justice because they really embody not only righteous work, but the ability to reach out to individuals and invite people to support whatever way they can, whether it's a $7 a month pledge or a $5 million gift. I highly recommend you're looking into them. Brian Kane is on the call today. And Brian, I wonder if I could call on you just to say a little bit more about social purpose corrections. When I created this slide, it was social profit corrections, but social purpose much more accurately describes what the work that they're doing as people who have recognized that one of the flaws in the American correction system is allowing private profit into corrections. Brian, can you say a little bit more about it?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. For those that don't know, Paul and I go way back. We're actually on a committee together with the American Correctional Association. And I came up with this idea. I used to work in the for-profit correction space and warden at 5 prisons across the U.S. with 16 different contracts. So I have a pretty good understanding of the culture of U.S. corrections. And frustrated with the outcomes, which are clearly a big F report card, I decided to take my experience in running prisons with the efficiency side in private corrections, implement that into a nonprofit model where the revenue generated goes back into people, not Wall Street or CEOs. So we're innovators, we're disruptors in this space. Paul's been a part of that team since the beginning. Raising money has been difficult, I will confess, although we have had some success. But it's how do we challenge the U.S. correction system as a whole? Clearly, we want to operate full prisons. Show the country that there's a humane way to give people a fair chance at life. And so that's kind of the premise of our model. We've raised a little over 1.8 million so far. We still got a ways to go. So yeah, Paul, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but I'm happy to go further if needed.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you so much. And I think that Jerry Lehrberger has managed to get back online. Jerry, can you unmute to say hello? Still not? That's okay. Let me pause for a moment here to, oh, here he comes. Jerry, are you there? I'm not sure that Jerry Lehrberger's audio is working. I always like to include everybody if we can, but Jerry, when you're able to speak, just speak up and we'll stop for a moment. I want to pause for a moment to invite you to comment on the experience that you've had with fundraising and the contrast between writing proposals to foundations, funders, venture capital funds, and developing relationships with individuals. Who has a story to share? A 1 or 2 minute version of a story about how you raised money successfully in the past.
I think I have a good one.
Oh, sorry, Snow.
Yeah.
Please, Snow, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Years ago, when I was a development director, I took a fundraising training. And at the end of the training, the trainer made an extraordinary offer that if you were with a very small nonprofit, and I was a development director for CASA for Children at the time, that had a very low budget, that he would provide some pro bono work with you. And I took advantage of his offer. We got to know each other and lost touch in the years in between, reconnected years later, and kind of picked up a personal / professional relationship. And one night, lying in bed, wondering who I should reach out to for fundraising, being a spiritual woman, the message came to me to reconnect with him. And a few months later, he cut us a check, a 4-figure check that we were grateful to have.
Thank you. It's a wonderful example.
I have a little ditty, if you will, kind of when you were talking about, dreaming and visioning. I had breast cancer in 2020, and I stepped back from the leadership of my organization for several years. And in like December of 2022, I had this vision of a project, which was this curriculum project. So in January, I sat down and got some support and wrote a grant. Unfortunately, I was able to ask for a substantial sum, and I didn't expect anything to happen, but it was just so extraordinarily beautiful to follow through on the vision. And lo and behold, the granting organization asked us to come back for the second round. Complicated why they couldn't fund us that particular round, and we resubmitted. And then in October, I'm here in the Netherlands, and I get this email, good news, you've been funded. And it was the first time in my life that I had actually gone through a process of having that kind of a vision, applying for a grant, and then receiving it. It was extraordinary. So
Yeah, and my favorite
that's
type of
inspiring.
proposal is an invited proposal. It's so much easier to get funding when someone says, we like what you're doing, please send us a proposal.
Well, that wasn't how it started, but it's how it ended up. But I agree with you. That makes a huge difference for sure.
Yeah. And I heard some noises from Jerry Lehrberger here. We'll try one last time to see if Jerry can unmute and introduce himself and give us the 1 minute version of what you're raising money for. Are you there, Jerry?
You tell me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's fantastic. I'm on a cell phone and also on a computer. So does everybody hear an echo?
Yeah, let me see if I can mute one of your phones. Okay, try now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Still echoing.
Okay, let me see if I can unmute. Give me 1 second.
All right. We'll live with the echo.
I'm sorry about that.
It's all right.
Let me see if I can turn this. Yeah. Anyway, technical difficulties this morning. Not my first time in life. I live with technical difficulties. Anyway, I live in Southern Oregon. I live in Ashland. And we have an organization. It's a for-profit and a nonprofit organization. The for-profit organization is an event center. It's a hot water development center where we have hot springs. And it's a beautiful 30-acre piece of property. And on that property, we host a nonprofit called Health Research Institute that is involved in agriculture, education, and cultural education as well. Cultural both with people, but with also with botanicals. Cultural in terms of seed saving from around the world, medicinal plants. I'm really a plant person, although I went into medicine. I found myself a little out of balance with medicine and the way medicine was being performed and the way medicine moved away from plants. So in my study of plants, I've traveled fairly extensively around the world and visited indigenous tribes and been able to mount a collection of plants. We live in an area that is very biodiverse, and we have the opportunity of collecting and growing seeds from Mexico up to Canada, northern Canada. So we have a collection called a Hortus Medicus, or a botanical garden of medicinal plants, and that's what we're raising money for at this time. So those are the endeavors. I didn't really catch on to the second aspect of it, but we've been able to manifest small grants. The organization, Health Research Institute, has been supported largely by the for-profit organization called Jackson Wellsprings. And I'm trying to shift away from support through a for-profit organization into the nonprofit realm. Our small contributions have been able to afford us a large greenhouse where we have a lot of starts and move them out into about 7 acres of land. And the entire property is about 30 acres. So we've started moving plants from the 7 acres into the rest of the property where we have mobile home park, RV park. So the entire campus becomes a botanical park. So that's the long and the short of it. And I live in Ashland. It's wonderful. If you're coming through, come visit. But I'm really honored by the quality of this group that Paul has pulled together, and the endeavors that we've taken on. They're big, but in watching Paul and how he works, all of this is so very possible. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you. And
Thanks,
I'm sorry
Jerry.
about that.
No worries. Let me just share a little bit more about some of the projects that I've been so satisfied over the years. One of my other favorites is the Laura X Institute, which was started by Laura X, who changed her name to Laura X in 1969 out of solidarity with former slaves who had lost their names. She felt that women who had to change their names in order to marry were also deprived of their last names. Laura is an activist at 83 years old, and she was outraged to find out that when she started in 1969 in 46 states in the Union, it was legal for a husband to rape his wife. Husbands were specifically exempted from the legal definition of rape, and in 13 states, social companions were exempted from the definition of rape. So she spent 25 years going state by state by state throughout the United States, eliminating those exemptions from the laws. Along the way, her friend Susan Brown Miller coined the phrase date rape. And Joe Biden has credited Laura's work with his National Violence Against Women Act. When I met Laura, she had mortgaged her house and had given everything she could find to support her work. She tends to do that. She's an altruist. We were able to raise several $1 million to get her papers preserved at the University of Houston and a number of other academic institutions around the world. And she's still giving away everything that she can to support her life work. So many of us who do this kind of work somehow haven't learned that lesson. I remember David Brower once said to me, if there's any money left in your checking account, you don't understand the urgency of the situation. And Laura embodies that spirit. So what is this process of fundraising? This process of having a dream to live for that is altruistic, that's bigger than you are, that's something that you want to have happen and you know that it's more than you can do yourself. It begins with confluent intuition. What I mean by that is there's this felt sense. You may not be able to see it yet, you can't touch it yet, you can't point to it yet, but you have this intuitive feeling that there's a flow happening between what's possible and what is, and that this is something that's worth doing. That leads to creative imagination. What if? I remember driving down what at the time was Santa Barbara Boulevard in Los Angeles, and a friend and I were imagining what would it be like if somebody planted trees down the median strip on this city street. Fast forward a few years, it was renamed Martin Luther King Boulevard, and I was back in Los Angeles driving down Martin Luther King, and there were trees all the way down the middle of the median. Turns out the trees were planted by the tree people from Los Angeles. So that creative imagination can be very powerful if you imagine what is possible. That leads to careful intention. And what I mean by that is you have to be careful what you ask for because you might get it. And also be very careful about not specifying what you want because the dream stream has a way of filling in the gaps. It's like water seeping into an area. It fills every void. And so be as specific as you can about asking for what you want and what you can envision, what you think is possible. Once you move into that planning phase, it requires conscious attention to get into the meticulous details as much as you can, because 85% of flaws happen in the design phase. When we miss stuff, it pops up later. And so as much conscious attention as you can devote in the early phases of imagining, developing your intentions about what we're going to do, it'll make it easier later on, because even after we get into implementation of very carefully done plans, 85% of our time is spent fixing things that popped up that we didn't anticipate, those famous circumstances beyond our control. Once we've given as much conscious attention as we can, then we identify the areas that we can't do ourselves, and that leads to concerted action, because the realization of dreams is like orchestrating a symphony. It really requires coordination, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on Thursday. Once concerted action is underway, calm reflection is necessary along the way to allow for mid-course correction. This is the evaluation phase. What are we doing here? Are we accomplishing what we set out to do? How's it feeling? Is it worth it? And then always along the way, consistent gratitude. So that's just a little map that I developed a few years ago to describe the process of realizing dreams. What does that feel like to you? What's your experience of the process of realizing dreams, from the what's possible to what's actually happening, to looking back and saying, gosh, what did we do here?
Paul, can I just say I'm smiling really broadly from that because so for my dissertation, I looked at longstanding health concerns of construction trade workers, and I wanted to use indigenous knowledge, and my professor was like, "You're going to do this," but the universe has a much broader imagination than I do. So it turned out, in order to organize my data, I looked at the Native American medicine wheel, and I was able to utilize a process that was Ian Lungold, who looked at the Mayan calendar, and he had very similar focus points like you do. You divided it a little bit more, but overall it is very similar to the 4 quadrants in the Native American medicine wheel, where you look at intention, attention, integrity, and intuition. So I just thought I was just smiling ear to ear because it's
Oh,
really
wonderful.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
really beautiful to see.
I'm always amazed to see how these things come together in confluent ways. There's so many taxonomies, and I don't think there's a right taxonomy, right pattern or map or way of describing what's going on. The Sarmun Brotherhood that Gurdjieff talked about in 1910 later emerged as the Enneagram. That the Gurdjieff folks don't associate any of the meaning to the pattern that has come to be recognized later on. But I just saw last week someone's doing an Enneagram in prison project to convey all that knowledge to people in prison. These ideas and patterns and maps and ways of describing the process emerge from different cultures and different languages at different times in different ways, but it's largely a very similar process.
Exactly. So it all has a core foundation to it. And like I said, I was just smiling because I'm like, there it is. I see it.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? The process of realizing dreams. So how do we raise money when we have a worthwhile dream? When we find ourselves the carriers of a dream in the same way that the traditional peoples talk about being a pipe carrier, that we are stewards of a possibility worth living for. There's a nitty-gritty to it that's worth attending to. And that nitty-gritty has to do with how do we engage in conversations with people. I'm going to share with you in the LinkedIn group later today the 7 questions, because much of the process of attracting people's attention comes down to a conversation, being able to have a conversation with people. My first mentor in fundraising was Irving Warner, who wrote the book, The Art of Fundraising. Title is being used by permission, by the way. And he took an approach that he called doing a feasibility study. And over the years, feasibility studies have kind of fallen out of favor because they often don't work. The process of assessing how money can be raised and how much money can be raised is much more than a survey. It's not just a study. It's not interview questions where we're trying to extract data to be put into a report, but rather questions offer like a doorway or a gateway or a portal, like an archway leading into a garden. When we ask questions, we open up the possibility of conversation. And so I'm going to share with you today and on Thursday this 7 questions approach. And there's nothing sacred about this. These are not the questions that you have to use. It's just a series of moments in a conversation that I have developed over decades of cultivating a relationship with someone who is a potential supporter of what you're aspiring to reach for. What I mean by that is, for example, Planting Justice used to run a street canvas like Greenpeace and the Hare Krishnas and so many other people. Planting Justice had formerly incarcerated people out on the street who were asking random people on the street to provide support for Planting Justice. One of our canvassers, a young man named Patrick, was outside a health food store in what's just south of El Sobrante, California. What are the last 2 BART stops in the East Bay? Maybe Albany?
El Cerrito and
El
Albany.
Cerrito. I think it was in El Cerrito. And a man was coming out of the health food store, and Patrick, canvassers can't block anybody's path, but Patrick walked along with this guy who was walking very close, very quickly, and said he wanted to tell him about Planting Justice and his story. And the man said, I don't have time to talk with you. And Patrick, being a tenacious canvasser, said, that's okay, I'll walk with you. And as they're walking to the car, Patrick's starting to say, I really think you should take a look at Planting Justice. I want you to become a monthly supporter. The man said, I can't do that. I'm on my way to an appointment, but here's my card, have somebody call me. And he got in his Mercedes sports car and drove away. Patrick looked at the card and took a cell phone photo of it and sent it to me and said, what do I do? He's the executive director of a foundation. I said, Patrick, he's a person. We're going to establish a relationship with him. And Patrick said, I don't know how to do it. You do it. So I called the man up. His name is Mark. And I asked him the 7 questions. Now, as I did that, I was driving to Portland. And I don't know how many of you have driven up Interstate 5 between California border and Portland, but there are a lot of mountains. And our call got interrupted 5 times. It was interesting to me that he called me back 5 times. Every time we got interrupted, he called back. But I asked him to tell me what he had done in the past that was similar to Planting Justice. And it turns out he's the executive director of a small foundation, $90 million, that was dedicated to ending food in the Contra Costa County and Alameda County area. Sorry, not ending food, ending hunger. That would be great if we ended food, then there'd be no more hunger. But I asked him what levels they had supported things, and it was a wide range. And I asked him what he liked about Planting Justice, what he didn't like about Planting Justice. Over the course of this conversation, which probably the conversation itself was maybe 20 minutes, not counting interruptions with the cell phone. He said, I really like what you're doing. I'd like to learn more. Can we come for a visit? And this is an important aspect of cultivating relationships with people, developing relationships, is to allow the dream stream to flow at its own pace. Raising money is not about asking for money. It's about developing an authentic relationship with someone who can support what you do. And you never know when that person is going to be the person who introduces you to the person who turns out to be a watershed moment. And so we did invite them to come visit. Mark came and visited. Then he came back and brought some of his board members. About 4 or 5 months later, after 2 visits, he and I had another conversation to continue the 7 questions. And I was able to ask him, could we count on your support if we asked for a donation? He said, I don't know, it'd be up to my board. And I said, well, can we send you a proposal? And he said, yes, I'd love it if you send us a proposal. I said, how much should we ask for? He said, ask for what you need. That to me is a wonderful doorway. So I asked him for $1 million. He asked us for a proposal. We sent a proposal. We talked a few more times. And make a long story short, the final result was he said, we've never given any money to you before. So we probably can't give you $1 million the first year, but how about if we give you $250,000 a year for 3 years and then we can talk? Planting Justice is a small organization. At that time, the budget was barely $1 million. So getting $250,000 is a big deal. It didn't take us long to say yes. Now, for somebody like Colleen, who's raising $150 million, we need to add some zeros to that conversation. But for Lynn Jackson, who's looking to establish a campus in the St. Louis area, you can correct me, Lynn, but I'm thinking maybe $4 or $5 million is enough to get that going. And so if we had somebody who offered us the first $1 million, that would be a great start. I think Brian Kane found the same thing. When somebody offered them $1 million, it wasn't enough to do everything they needed to do, but it sure did pay a lot of salaries.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, you're pretty close right now, depending on how we do it, but we're actually going to shoot for 10 because we want to have several years of escrow.
Oh,
So
good.
we'll
That
have
means
to
I
go
get to come to
back.
St. Louis.
Yes.
And Brian, you're in a similar place, right? Your first $1 million gift got you out of the gate, and now you need more, right?
Right. Yeah. Our first gift was actually from the CEO of an oil company through a friend. He was just a blind introduction and he immediately tracked to us. The second was Arnold Ventures, which is, you have to be asked, I think, to really get supported. It was a LinkedIn introduction. I just sent a message out out of nowhere said, "Hey, this is who we are. This is what we're doing." They said, "Cool." Nothing happened. Almost a year later, they said, "Are you still doing this?" And we got $1 million grant from them. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. You pointed earlier. I have a rule: I never turn down a conversation with anybody, as silly as sometimes they may seem. Because you never know who knows who. And with our vision, obviously, bringing humanity to a correction system is a pretty powerful message. So, but yeah, Arnold Ventures immediately tracked to us, and then once we have Arnold Ventures support, we're hoping it's going to bring more support. Hasn't happened yet, but we're hoping we're headed that direction.
And there's a wonderful song in the movie La La Land. Here's to the fools who dream, crazy as we might seem. That's where it starts, is having the courage to reach out and ask someone to have a conversation with you. And when I set up conversations, I always assure people that I'm not going to ask for money on the first date. It's really important to let people know that you're interested in hearing their advice, in talking with them about what matters to them, perhaps in sharing some of the plans that your project or your organization has, but really with an eye towards getting their advice. And this is important because many people are not interested in what you're doing. They're interested in what they're doing. And so having the opportunity to talk with someone about what they care about really matters. One of my clients was introduced to a family that was quite affluent and invited to fly to the Caribbean to meet with them to talk about the project that they were working on. When I followed up several months later with the person that they had visited in the Caribbean, he said, "No, I'm not going to give them any money because they came to my Spanish fort in the Caribbean with 4-foot thick walls and a 400-year-old history. And the first thing they did when they walked down was they laid out the plans for their building. And they spent the entire time talking about their building and their project, and they never asked about the building that they were standing in." So this is a very important distinction to make. Are you interested or are you interesting? It's much more effective to be interested, to ask people what they care about and what they've done in the past. And one of the processes that I use for this, I call facting. If you've ever spent any time with infants and toddlers, you'll recognize that infants and toddlers often point at something and they say, even pre-verbal kids will point. But when they point, they're looking at you. It's almost like they're playing the game, ha ha, made you look. But it's really that they're interested to see, what am I doing that's catching your attention? And so you can use facting when you walk into somebody's house or their office or anytime that you meet on an area that's their turf. Look for stuff. Or it can be jewelry that they're wearing. If you ask, "What is that? Can you tell me about it? Does it have a story with it?" You'll be amazed at how often people have stories. And somebody like Snow Thorner, who has an art gallery, oh my goodness, you want to have an education, go to Snow Thorner's art gallery in Montague, California. Snow, what's the population of Montague?
1,200.
1,200 people in Montague, California. And she has this art gallery that is unique in the entire Northwest. And she's developing a regional reputation. And you walk into that art gallery and point to anything and ask for the story, and it'll change your life. Because she has amazing artifacts in there. And that's pretty much true of everyone's house. The jewelry that people wear, the books that they're reading, anything you can find to ask about establishes a conversation. Would someone like to share a little bit about an experience you've had in developing a relationship with someone by asking a question like, "What is that? Tell me about that." Don't make me call on you.
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
mine's almost the opposite. I had lunch with some people who actually had already given a very large donation. But the funny thing is, I asked them a couple of questions and they started asking me 100 questions because
Yeah.
they didn't have any answers and they were just so engrossed in what I was able to share with them. And it just perpetuated the relationship to the where they actually invited me to their house to tell them more. So
Right.
that was interesting. Yeah.
But it started with your asking a question, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they weren't forthcoming about what they wanted to talk about. Turns out what they wanted to talk about was you, right?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, it was an unusual situation. The first time I met them, the gentleman came to something and I said, well, who are you here to honor? And he said, uh, you. And I said, oh, no, no, you don't understand. This is about these other people. And then he said, yeah, I do. I know that. He said, but I was here because of you. And I was floored. I was totally floored. So sometimes I guess what I can say is that you can build a relationship before you even know people by virtue of what your mission might be and
Yeah.
how you present it and yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and checking in with them along the way, yes?
Yeah, we stay in touch. Absolutely. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
grandparents now, and it's harder to get them. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's often true with people who inherit money. They're not very interested when they don't have any money, but then all of a sudden when they come into money, then they get interested. And if you've been interested in them along the way, you have a pre-existing relationship. Someone else, an example?
Paul, I think how I connected with you is a way, because you sent me, or your people, I'm not sure, you guys sent me a text message. And unfortunately, I guess, the way the world is, my first response was, is this a scam? But then I decided to be brave and I was like, well, I won't ever know if I don't ask the question, and so I responded to your inquiry and you started asking me about questions about my foundation and then we started sharing. And so after our conversation, which I don't know, was at least an hour or so, I really was like, okay, not a scam. I think this guy's legit. And that was really great. So I think in the way that you and I connected, so, and
Yeah,
I'm
thank
really
you for that. And I've been amazed at how this process works with strangers. So I decided to look for keywords on LinkedIn. So I was looking for sustainability, I was looking for founders, I was looking for entrepreneurs, I was looking for board members, and I don't remember which keyword it was that attracted me in your description, but I just reached out. And now it makes a big difference when you're developing relationships with people if you actually do care, because I actually do care. I mean, everybody on this call, I'm fascinated by what you're doing and I want to help. And so it's important that when you're doing this outreach to people with whom you're developing relationships, that you actually do care. Don't pretend to care. I'm really not interested in getting birthday cards. But when people are interested in creating a world that works for everyone and they're doing something that's interesting, I really love to hear about that. So what is this all provoking in you so far? Helga?
You said wear jewelry. So when I wear my jewelry, which is squash that I made by hand out of Sculpey clay, people say, oh, I love your necklace. And then I can talk about it and talk about how pleasurable it is to make things that are representations of real food and sort of honoring the food. And then I talk about how great it is for kids to use their hand and that they're deprived of that in the school system. They paint, but they don't, make things with their hand. And then I talk about what's related to that with my things that I do with kids. But definitely I wear my art form and then it starts something.
Yeah, it gives you some. Marisa, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny, I have two necklaces that always open up a conversation, and one has beach glass and abalone on it. And, there's a little story that goes with it. People go, oh, that's so beautiful. And another one that was repurposed from a thrift store that I rebeaded and put beads on, and people always go, that's so beautiful. And I explain, yeah, I repurposed it, and that opens up a whole conversation about recycling and repurposing. So necklaces are a great thing to wear when you're talking to somebody. So I appreciated what she just said.
Yeah, and so wearing something interesting is a conversation starter. And what's important in developing relationships with prospective supporters is, can you pivot there from what's interesting about you to being interested in them? Oh, are you interested in vegetables? Are you interested in necklaces? Tell me more. This question, tell me more, is a really wonderful question. And one of the questions that's not in the 7 questions, but that I often share with people is, what would you like to have happen as a result of the conversation we're having today? How do I say this? My mother used to introduce me as her youngest and most brash. That was when I was 8, because I was always talking with strangers. And small talk is great. It's wonderful to master the art of small talk, but I'm one of those people who's waiting to have a conversation about things that matter. I'm one of those people who's waiting to have a conversation about the realization of dreams. And so I'm not hesitant about saying to people, what would you like to have happen as a result of the conversation we're having today? Because it gives me an invitation to ask the question, tell me more. What would that make possible? This is the beginning of a conversation to develop a sense of relatedness with someone who can be of help to you. Lynn Jackson will recognize the name David Stewart, who's a wonderful, sincere Christian man who started Worldwide Technologies. And I don't remember, Lynn, I think it's about an $8 billion a year company now.
It very well could be.
Yeah.
We kind of lost track.
And he owns it. But one day I was at a gathering that Lynn was at, and with Ida Goodwin Woolfolk, whom you'll remember fondly, I know, Lynn. And Mr. Stewart was there, and I was chatting with him about what he's involved in, what interests him. And I said, I'd really like to talk with you about this more. Can we get together tomorrow? And he said, no, tomorrow I have to fly to Oakland. And I said, well, I have to fly to Oakland tomorrow too. I was leaving around 4 o'clock. He said, oh, well, why don't you come with me on my plane? I said, okay, I have a Southwest ticket. I can change it without penalty. So we met out at the private airport, and it was him, me, a flight steward, and one other person, which opened up a 4-hour conversation about what he cares about, old cars and Christianity and youth and the programs that he was developing to help youth learn about technology, and on and on. It did lead to a gift, but it wasn't the agenda of that day. My agenda that day was to find out what he cared about and what really mattered to him. And so asking questions is really important. Some other examples from your experience. When have you established a relationship with someone that led to support, and how did it start?
I had a relationship that started sort of with a necklace. I was singing in a choir, and we were kind of weak in one part and invited a ringer to come in and help us out with a performance. And she had on this absolutely gorgeous necklace, and actually shimmered like gold, but it was made out of straw, which is a straw that grows in Brazil. Turns out she was the director of another chorus, and called Brazilian Voices. And Brazilian Voices is a bossa nova group, and bossa nova just happened to be my favorite music in the world. I fell in love with it when I was 6 years old, the first time I heard one note samba. So I auditioned and got into the group. And it turns out that it's a nonprofit, and they provide health and wellness care to hospice patients and staff, cancer care wards. They also have a cultural exchange program that they do, kind of building, it's sort of an ambassadorship between between the countries of Brazil and the United States. And so we go into schools, or have children come to auditoriums and provide an introduction to Brazil, the culture, the people, the foods, history. And we give a concert to people who are on the spectrum called Quiet Bossa, dressing a certain way. And as a consequence of being in that group, I met Flavia, who is my business partner in the Blooming Zunies. And it was actually her idea to take my artwork, and she thought it would be an amazing vehicle for which to teach children. And then from there, it just kind of started, it was a 10-year process of growing this business to become, I think, what's going to be a pretty significant player. We've got some proprietary IT that came along the way. She was working for, I think, HBO at the time. She now does a lot of contracting whenever Apple wants to introduce products to the Latin American community. They bring her up. And she is connected with another good gentleman who is a contractor for Apple, who is the guy who's given us the license for this proprietary technology that is going to be a game changer and democratize access to augmented reality. And it all started with a passion about singing in a necklace.
Yes. And we're going to talk more about this on Thursday when we talk about how to avoid the fundraising abyss. But really, what I'm suggesting here is the golden chain of referrals. If you know who has the money and you have a relationship with them, and you went to high school with them and they've given you money before and you can go to them and ask for money, everything's wonderful. But if you don't know where to start, you start with the 3-foot rule. Does anybody remember the 3-foot rule? It's anybody within 3 feet is who you're supposed to be talking with. And if there's nobody within 3 feet, anybody over 3 feet tall will do.
Hey, Paul, one time I was in a group and they had a 2 feet rule. It said, ask anything with 2 feet.
That'll do.
I was waiting to hear what yours was.
Well, it sounds like my wife's axiom, which is a little different. She says, never trust anybody with fewer than 4 feet.
Oh, good. Whoa. Oh,
she likes dogs.
I got it. Yeah. Well, no, 2 feet, 2 to 3 feet sounds good to me.
So, Dheeraj commented in the chat that tell me more is not a question. Busted. It's an invitation, but to be delivered gently, leaning forward. And for those who aren't monitoring the chat, Snow's looking for an accountability partner to spur each other on with fundraising and outreach. So you can message each other in the chat. And there will be an opportunity in the LinkedIn group, for which I will put the link in the chat in a little while, and you'll receive it by email also. If you join that LinkedIn group, that's where I'm going to put the homework, which is just a simple invitation to adapt an outreach letter or an email to someone who's a prospective supporter. But the LinkedIn group is really important for encouraging dialogue. That's where you can share contact information and whatever, because it's a private group. It's not like it's going to get picked up by some AI bot and you get text messages because you put your phone number in our LinkedIn group. But what I want to harp on here is the golden chain of referrals. How do you begin getting referrals to people with whom you can engage in the 7 questions? And you start with who you know. You start with the favorites, the people that for whom you feel an affinity. And Selene asked if I'm going to be sharing the 7 questions. Yes, I'll put them in the LinkedIn group as a Google Doc so that you can adapt them for your own use. Because you never know who's known. This is the old 6 degrees of separation. Now, the 6 degrees of separation is really a myth because global culture in the 21st century is highly stratified by caste. And so it is not true that you are necessarily 6 degrees of separation away from anybody, because people tend to orbit around their own castes. It's like the people who sell alpacas. In the United States, alpacas were sold as a growth industry 20 years, 30 years ago. People could come in and hear about people selling individual alpacas for $25,000. The only problem is that those sales only happened among the people who owned alpacas already. And the new people coming in weren't invited to those events. It's like yachts. When I was a workers' comp underwriter, I discovered a case where yacht salesmen were being paid as independent contractors. And I looked at the definition of independent contractor and the rights to have workers' comp protection and employee rights. And I said, these people are employees. And I went to the field vice president for California's workers' compensation system, which at the time was $8 billion a year, like 265,000 businesses or something. And I said, these guys are employees. I think we need to bust these people. I think we need to correct them and tell them that their salespeople are employees. He looked at me and said, Paul, who owns yachts? You are not going to win this argument. Don't bother. So that stratification is there. And so we need to find somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who went to school with somebody who turns out to be Michael Mars from Mars Candy. The person who came to the benefit auction for the Ukraine last year, whose late husband founded a major software company. We didn't know her, but she came to the event, and because she bid, I followed up with her. And I did the 7 questions with her in her house. And she was quite forthcoming about her history and what she did and what she's capable of. It will happen serendipitously. One of the reasons that I give that cycle of dream realization is that in the time of confluent intuition, the dream stream will bring you connections. The dream stream will bring you opportunities to engage in conversation. And that 3-foot rule, of course, is facetious, and the 2-foot rule works just as well. But it is a matter of talking to as many people as you possibly can, but selecting by who you think might be the right person for you to be talking with. It's not magic, but there are serendipitous qualities that are unpredictable. Brian's example earlier of reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn, or of going to gatherings with people who may disagree with you or have a different perspective. One of my great supporters for Golden Rule Reentry, well, our great supporters, I hope I don't offend anybody. I'm not a supporter of the ex-president. And yet in Southern Oregon, there are a lot of people who do support the ex-president. and I met a guy who was wearing a Let's Go Brandon hat. So I engaged in a conversation with him about Let's Go Brandon. Turns out he had also had a son who had been involved with the criminal justice system, and he could be very helpful to Golden Rule Reentry because he owned a building. And he was very interested in helping them, despite the fact that they're completely opposite on the political spectrum. His son had had a bad experience and he wanted to make a difference in the criminal justice system and how people get back into culture. So he was able to make it possible for Golden Rule Reentry to open a drop-in center in his building. We don't know, and that was facting. That was me asking him about his Let's Go Brandon hat, which I was offended to talk about. No offense to Brandon Gilman, who's on the call. Because I wouldn't normally want to engage in that conversation with someone. But if we don't engage in conversations with people who are different from us, our world will be much more limited by that. And we miss opportunities to have meaningful conversations with people who can help.
Paul,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
No,
I
go
just
ahead,
wanted
Linda.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for that, because I feel like for me, that is one of the biggest challenges, is that stratification and how to find those connections. Because even though my background is engineering and I got my doctorate in engineering, I found that stratification within engineering, especially as a minority female, to try to find those connections to meet those people like within academia, which is one reason I'm not there, like as a professor or whatever, so it's been really challenging to find those people, because I often have experienced that people have certain biases about like how I present myself, and so they don't want to hear me, solely because they've already just kind of had those biases, and that shuts me out. So I find it interesting in how people behave, and then it creates these challenges. And for like your previous question about the connections with funders, I think I told you, and I'll make it short, where it was a gentleman who was quite the gazillionaire reached out to me, and he provided funding because in the end he was interested in trying to put like a workshop for his solar panels within the indigenous community. And I was like, no, that's not what we're looking for. And then his wife, he was able to fund like these small rest houses for the community, but that's because I found out later that his wife wanted to do yoga retreats, but they didn't realize that everything was like almost at a 90-degree angle at the top of the mountain, so not very feasible for yoga. And it was like really, really cold. So they ended up providing the money before they realized these things, that it wasn't going to happen. So they had an agenda, behind the scene that they weren't very like open about, but we still got the houses. So we're like, thank you. But they shut themselves off when I asked for other, like, hey, do you have other possible connections, this and that? They shut down and they left, they just abandoned us. And we were just like, okay, we don't need you. We'll keep moving, so it's been interesting to see those challenges and how to find those right groups of people because of the stratification that you talk about. And so I'm so grateful for Cole and Brandon, who are on here from Engineers Without Borders. That's how we ended up connecting with them, trying to find like the right groups of people to help us move forward.
Yeah. Some other examples that someone can share of how did you establish a relationship with someone you weren't expecting?
The first conversation I had on Arnold Ventures, the first question, and understand my background, served in the Marine Corps, officer in the Army, warden of 5 prisons across the US. And the first conversation with Arnold Ventures was, number one, first conversation is, are you supportive of organized labor and unions, and will you use them in your prisons? The very first question. And this was a high level person, decision maker within Arnold Ventures. And that's, typically in private corrections, at least coming from the background, unions can complicate things. I was never against unions. In fact, I worked with them quite successfully, but it was not what I tracked as being the first question asked with the funding source, and I had to quickly be able to answer that question. Now, I wasn't prepared for it, so I just answered off the top of my value systems, and I answered yes. I mean, the way correctional officers get treated in corrections, I don't blame them for having unions, and we have to work together to that solution. But I think that's an example of how I was not expecting the conversation to go in a direction, especially with a major funding source that I was intrigued and engaged with, to help us moving forward. So I don't know if that helps as a story, but I had to quickly change my narrative, understanding the person receiving the message.
Yeah, and that's a really important example of you get to set your own limits. You are raising something, you're raising money for something you care about, and there may be some people who are off the list for you, so that you don't want to accept money. Planting Justice, for example, that's been so very successful. I negotiated an opportunity for a gift of $10,000 from Pacific Gas and Electric. And they said, Pacific Gas and Electric is part of the system that we're trying to change. We don't want their money. I remember when the Tree People was early on, let's see, we can figure out the year because George Bush Sr. called. And he had somehow heard about the Tree People and he wanted to talk with Andy Lipkiss. And Andy said, no, I don't want to talk to him. He declined to call. One of the largest proposals I wrote in the 1970s was we got a line item in the state budget for $130,000. The local assembly person was very friendly and helped us get into the state budget to get a $130,000 grant to support Coldwater Canyon Park. And Andy looked at the administrative overhead requirements for this proposal. It was a reimbursement grant. We weren't going to get the money right away. We'd have to spend the money and then bill for the money. And there would be a 90 to 120 day lag time on receiving the money. And we didn't have a line of credit at the time, and he declined the grant. At Natural Capitalism Solutions in Boulder, we had a wonderful supporter who had given us $100,000 several times. And she started coming into the office and telling the staff what to do. She was directing the staff and telling them what was important and what she wanted and what she needed. And we had a couple of blunt conversations with her about that we really appreciate her support for the work that we do, but it's the work that we do, and we're not her staff to do what she wants to do. Well, she got very mad and went away and never gave us any money again. You don't always have to adjust your values or your project just because somebody gives you money. Some of you have heard me talk about the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, which was one of our first clients when I was working with Irving Warner. And one of the 7 questions is there anything that we're doing that you don't like? And the question that follows on that is there anything we're not doing that you think we should be doing? And this man, Saul Baker, who's passed on now, who owned a security company in Los Angeles, said, well, yes, the Weizmann Institute of Science is not doing enough to support the security of Israel. I'd like to see them doing more to support the security of Israel. And we said, well, if the Weizmann Institute of Science were ready to take that on, would you know where the money would come from, or would you be willing to put up the funding for that? And he said, well, yes, I would like to endow a chair in security studies. I have $1 million set aside for that. We said, oh, well, let's talk to the Weizmann Institute of Science. So we did. And they said, oh, yes, we'd be happy to establish a chair in security studies. So we went back to Saul Baker and he said, well, I would like my gift to be announced at a dinner at the Century Plaza Hotel, and I'd like Henry Kissinger to be the keynote speaker. We said, okay. And so we arranged through an intermediary who was on the board of the Weizmann Institute of Science, who happened to be a Viscount in Great Britain, who had connections to Henry Kissinger, to have Henry Kissinger come and be our keynote speaker at the Century Plaza Hotel. And with that as seed ideas, we were able to continue our golden chain of referrals. And we actually raised $2 million before the event, which was announced at the event. And that all came out of the question, what are we not doing that you think we should be doing? So where we go with these conversations is really important. And it's not always a yes answer when someone says, well, yes, you're not doing this, and I think you should be doing this. You may say, no, that's not what we want to do. I'm working with an eco village in St. Louis that Lynn knows about that has turned down several $1 million investments in their real estate development. This is a for-profit venture to build an eco village. And a number of developers have come in and said, oh, yes, I'll put up the first $1 million, and you just have to redesign it so that it's an apartment building. And they said over and over again, no, we're not looking for an apartment building. This is going to be an eco village. It's going to have some curves, and it's going to have gathering places. And we're trying to promote community here. We're not just trying to get saleable apartments on the market. So this process of the golden chain of referrals is a delicate negotiation sometimes, because you want to be sure that what you're getting money for is what you want to be doing, and not succumb to, oh, if we just stretch a little bit, we can get this money. And if we just stretch a little bit more, we can get that money. And then before you know it, you're getting all this money to do what you don't really want to do. And that leads to burnout and disillusionment. So be careful with all that sort of stuff. Now, I do want to call your attention again to the LinkedIn group, because in the LinkedIn group, I'm going to link to this letter to prospective supporters. And what I'd like to invite you to do, not now, but on your own time, that this information will be up in the LinkedIn group within the hour, to adapt this letter for your use. And what we're doing here is we're establishing an outreach to people who are your prospective supporters. This process this week is not about me showing off how much I know. I'd like to give you some little things that you can do to move your fundraising forward. And so you can adapt this letter. I originally wrote this letter to set me up for conversations. It works very well if you have a third party who can do the outreach, or you can take the most influential person with regard to the person to whom you're writing. Let me say that a little more simply. You want this letter to come from someone who is in a position of relatedness, connection, and perhaps influence with the person to whom you're writing. So it's not always the same person. When we were doing WinStar Foundation, the letter often came from John Denver. Or when I'm working with Hunter Lovins at Natural Capitalism Solutions, the letter will often come from her. Selene may remember Bruce Orick in Boulder, when the folks who were doing the movie The Cove about the dolphins in Japan were raising money in Boulder. Bruce would write a letter for them to someone to set up a meeting. And it simply says, we'd like to ask for your advice. We're considering undertaking a fundraising effort in the coming months to put our project on solid ground financially. But before we undertake the effort, we'd like to be sure of the possibility of success. And so, for example, when Bruce wrote this letter to a couple of guys who were scuba diving enthusiasts in Boulder, I don't normally think of Boulder as a place for scuba diving enthusiasts, but he introduced Louis to go and see them. They asked for his advice. They said, look, we're trying to get this film funded and we don't know where to go. And they said, well, how much do you need? And he said, well, we need $1 million to get started. And they said, okay, we can give you that. What else do you need? The idea here is to open up a relationship by reaching out with someone who is recognizable to the person to whom you're reaching out. And then assure them that they're not going to be asked for money at this time. It's really important. And I just noticed a typo in this letter. You want to replace my name at the end unless you're asking me to go see these people. But you want to set up an opportunity to talk 30 to 45 minutes. I've done this in as little as 10 or 15 minutes. I've had it take as long as 2 years. It's a cultivation of a relationship, not a survey from which you're asking to acquire data. The idea here is that you're reaching out to someone to ask for their advice. And there's a little more to it than that, because let me share my screen again here for just a moment. The conversation takes place as a cascade, like the seven heavenly pools on the south end of Maui, if you've ever been there, the sacred cascading of fresh water down the side of the volcano. Each conversation opens up a new possibility for conversation, and each conversation begins with a question. How did you first hear about us? Have you invested in similar organizations or projects in the past? Please tell me the story. What do you think of our current and proposed activities? Is there anything our program is doing or proposing that you don't like? Are there projects or activities we should be doing that we currently aren't? If we were to undertake such a project, would you provide funding or would you help? If you were asked to join the board, could we count on you for a personal investment, etc.? Those kinds of questions. At what level? I have no qualms about asking people what level of support they're comfortable with. If I'm doing it on the phone, I'll say, are we talking about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions? People will often respond quite honestly. Worst thing they'll do is say, oh, I don't feel comfortable talking about that right now. Well, that's fine. But I've actually never had anybody get offended with me for asking them how much money they would consider giving to this project. The only time I've had people get offended is when I don't ask for enough. It's really surprising. I've had several people get mad at me because I didn't ask them for enough. We just went out to the Coquille Indian tribe on the Oregon coast. They had given a small gift to Golden Rule Reentry. And as we walked in and greeted the people at this ceremony that they were having to announce their giving, the program coordinator came up to me and whispered in my ear, next time, ask for more money. You didn't ask for enough. We like when that happens. But we're setting up these conversations here because what we're leading into is how not to ask for money. How can we open the conversation about making an investment without asking for money? Now, this is just me. I don't like asking for people for money unless they tell me that they want to invest or they want to make a contribution. And then I'll ask at what level would you feel most comfortable. But many people are the other end of the spectrum for me. They're outright solicitors. I can't remember Esther's last name. I think it was Birnbaum, who was a trainer for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the pro-Israel lobby that we hear so much about. When I was a key contact for them in Aspen, she introduced herself as a pushy Jewish broad from New York who's going to ask you for money. And people expected her for that. You know, if they didn't want to talk about that, they wouldn't give her the appointment. And she's very effective by just asking people for money. It's not my style. I prefer to ask people for their advice, to ask them what they care about. And then in the context of the conversation, I can say, if we get that far along, I was thinking of you for an investment around $10,000. How does that feel to you? I haven't asked them for the investment yet. I'm just asking for their advice. Or if you were asked today, how would you feel about making an investment or a contribution of $1 million to get this eco village off the ground? Would you consider making a gift of $1 million? Would you consider guaranteeing a loan? Some of you have heard me talk about Michael Stranahan, who refused to join the board of the Rocky Mountain Institute because he said if he did, he would probably take over. And at one point I said, would you consider making a gift of $150,000? He said no, but would a letter of credit help? And that was how we got the building built for the Rocky Mountain Institute. So the purpose here is to set up a conversation that includes these direct questions, because the direct questions lead you to finding, is this someone who's qualified and who's interested and who's capable of supporting at the level that we need? So the LinkedIn group is going to have links to these documents and also your comments. And we're going to spend an extra hour today in the VIP session for those of you who have signed up for the VIP. It's an honor system. We'll just stay on the phone here for another hour. But the LinkedIn group, you should have received email. If you didn't, drop me a note and I'll send you the link again to allow you to join the LinkedIn group so that you can gain access to the homework. So let's just kind of slow down here for a minute and give you an opportunity to comment. What has this provoked in you so far today?
I would say, having done sales, marketing, fundraising for many, many years, and this is my second time in the class, I was, until today, I was much more resistant to the idea of being more patient around the development of the relationships. And I think you have finally really sold me. I needed to just, I guess, hear more of your wonderful stories. So thank you for that, Paul.
Well, thanks, no. Yeah, it's about the relationship. And it's not about the gift. It's not about getting information.
So Paul, my question is like, where do you go and find these relationships? Like, I think maybe my situation is a little different since I work full time and I do this like part-time, not to say like it's, impossible, which, it's not, but it's like, how do I find those places where I can start cultivating some of those relationships?
Yeah.
And then like with Cole and Brandon who are helping me, they're students. So they're engineering students and they're supporting like the fundraising aspect of their Engineers Without Borders chapter. So it's like, how do we find these relationships with these types of individuals? So
that's going to be our subject on Thursday.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
And it's not a how. In other words, it's not about dancing by the numbers and applying the formula. It's about trusting the flow of the dream stream, developing relationships with people that lead to introductions to other people. And so you start with the people that you can think of in your circle of friends and contacts now. In Wall Street fundraising, it's called FF&F, Family, Friends, and Fools. And you reach out to those people and you practice the 7 questions with them. And you have these conversations for possibility. And you often don't know where the serendipitous contact is going to come from. It's not always the person that you think of. The flip side of that is, if the people you're trying to reach are easy to reach, you're trying to reach the wrong people. It's an unfortunate truth that the people who can really help you are probably hard to reach. And so it takes some innovation and some tenacity to get to the right people. So I know that that's not probably the answer that you wanted, but I don't have the magic formula, but we're going to talk about that a lot on Thursday. I just lost my audio. Can someone please say something so that I know you're still there?
We hear you.
Okay, it's back.
And I think
I thought
Helga
I'd
had,
lost you.
I think
Can I
Helga
say
wanted to
quickly
say
something?
Yes, please, Helga.
And you are going to talk about it on Thursday. It occurred to me that my basic profession, being a photographer of events and volunteering for them and doing weddings, things like that. Oh my God, do I ever have connections? I just hadn't thought of how to use them for what I'm trying to do now. That is not photography. Yeah.
Yeah, and taking pictures of people is a wonderful way to deepen your relationship. Sending them a picture of them or of their project or of anything that they would recognize opens up new possibilities for conversations.
Yeah.
Especially now that we can take pictures on our phones. You should, as often as you can, if you're developing a relationship with someone, take pictures and send them. All right. I think we're going to transition here for the day. Those of you who are signed up for the VIP session, please stay on the line with me. And if you haven't signed up for the VIP session and would like to, stay on with us anyway, and I will send you the link later.
Hey, Paul, one more thing. This is Gerald.
Hi, Gerald.
Hi. I just wanted to say, you and I had a project here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Took a little longer than we wanted to, but I wanted to thank you because I learned a tremendous amount about people and relationships through that endeavor. So I want to thank you for that, and look forward to more classes on how you do what you do. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Gerald. And it's great to see you. Gerald's talking about a project that we did in St. Louis that was supposed to be a 3 month project that ended up, I'm sorry, in Chicago, that ended up being like a 3 year project because nobody planned on the pandemic in between.
Yeah.
And he stuck with it and I stuck with it and we met a lot of good people and we ended up making a lot of money. But the dream stream doesn't always flow at the pace that we want it to. And what matters is the relationship, that we take care of each other along the way, because then we get the real benefit. I think it was James Agee who said, when all is said and done, all we have are each other and our stories.
But at the end of the day, we got her done.
Yes, we did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you see Arlene Price, please give her my love.
I will.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Stay on if you'd like to have a less formal VIP conversation. And the rest of you, we will see you on Thursday.
Have a good one.
And yes, Linda, it's fine for everyone to stay on. Okay, the famous few. Here we are. The VIP time is an opportunity for us to delve more deeply into your project and what you need to get from here to there. So since we have a smaller group here, let's do a quick go round again to introduce what it is you're raising money for, how it's going, and how much you need to raise. Let me put that in the chat here. We want this to go to everyone. Your project, how it's going, how much do you need? And that's just a conversation starter. You don't have to just, once again, I'm not doing a survey here. It's an opportunity for you to take the conversation a little bit deeper. By the way, I'm going to stop the recording here because we do not record the VIP sessions.